Ed Sullivan personally called Miles Davis 3 times, begging him to return to the show that had made them both television legends. Each time, Miles said no. When reporters finally asked why he was walking away from guaranteed fame and fortune, his answer revealed something profound about the price of success and the courage to walk away from it. The first call came just 2 weeks after Miles's legendary piano performance had made Ed Sullivan Show history. It was March 15, 1958, and Miles was in his New York apartment, having breakfast and reading the morning papers, when his phone rang at exactly 9 a.m. "Miles, this is Ed Sullivan." "What can I do for you, Ed?" Miles asked, his voice carrying that characteristic coolness that had become his trademark. Miles paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. He had expected follow-up from the show, but not from Sullivan himself. The host rarely made personal calls to performers, preferring to let his producers handle the business side of bookings. "Miles, I want to talk to you about coming back on the show. What you did 2 weeks ago, it was extraordinary. The phone calls, the letters, the press coverage. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of television." This was true. Miles's piano performance had generated more viewer response than any single act in the show's history. CBS had received over 50,000 phone calls in the days following the broadcast, mostly from viewers wanting to know more about the jazz musician who had played classical piano with such unexpected brilliance. "I'm glad people enjoyed it," Miles replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly interested in extending the conversation. More importantly, the performance had attracted a new demographic to the Ed Sullivan Show. Young people, college students, and classical music enthusiasts who had never watched the variety program were suddenly tuning in, hoping to see more performances like Miles's. But Miles had learned something important from his previous encounter with Sullivan, and he wasn't about to forget that lesson. "Miles, I want to offer you something unprecedented," Sullivan continued. "How would you like to become a regular on the show? Monthly appearances, your choice of material, complete creative control. We're talking about a 3-year contract that would make you the highest-paid jazz musician on television." Miles set down his coffee cup and considered this offer. In 1958, television exposure of this magnitude could transform a jazz career completely. Regular appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show would guarantee national recognition, album sales, and concert bookings that most musicians could only dream of. "Miles, maybe you don't understand what I'm offering here. This would be guaranteed national exposure every month. Your albums would sell like nothing you've ever experienced. We could make you a household name." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sullivan clearly hadn't expected such a quick rejection. "I appreciate the offer, Ed," Miles said, "but I'm not interested." Miles considered his answer carefully. "Because I know why you want me back, Ed, and it's not because you respect my music." "Can I ask why?" "I understand exactly what you're offering," Miles replied, "and I'm telling you I'm not interested." The conversation ended shortly after that, with Sullivan promising to call back once Miles had time to think about it properly. But Miles had already made his decision, and it wasn't going to change. The second call came 6 months later, in September 1958. This time Sullivan was more direct about what he was offering. "Miles, CBS is prepared to offer you an exclusive television contract, $50,000 for the first year, with increases built in for subsequent years. You would have your own segment on the show, Miles Davis Presents or something similar. Complete artistic freedom within broadcast standards." "Ed, do you remember what you said to me backstage before my last appearance on your show?" Miles listened to the entire proposal without interruption. When Sullivan finished, Miles asked a simple question. The offer was staggering. $50,000 in 1958 was equivalent to nearly $500,000 in today's money. For a jazz musician, it represented financial security that was almost unheard of in the industry. "You told me I was playing piano instead of trumpet, and that I should be grateful for the opportunity to perform on your show at all. You said I needed to learn how television worked." "Miles, that was..." Sullivan paused. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Now you want me back, because I proved that I'm more than you thought I was. But your opinion of me hasn't changed, Ed. You still see me as something you can use. The only difference is that now you know I'm valuable. That was you showing me exactly what you think of me as an artist." Miles interrupted. "You thought you could humiliate me, control me, Make me into whatever you wanted me to be for your show. The fact that I turned your attempt at humiliation into something beautiful doesn't change what you tried to do." Miles paused, letting that sink in. "I don't work for people who don't respect me regardless of how much they're willing to pay. And I especially don't work for people who try to diminish me and then come crawling back when they realize they made a mistake." Sullivan tried to respond, but Miles continued. The second conversation ended even more abruptly than the first. Some musicians thought Miles was making a mistake, walking away from an opportunity that could elevate jazz music to new heights of mainstream acceptance. Others admired his principled stand against what they saw as exploitation of black artists by white-controlled media. The third and final call came in February 1959, almost a year after Miles's historic performance. By this time, the jazz world was watching the situation closely. Miles's refusal to return to the Ed Sullivan Show had become a topic of discussion in music magazines and jazz clubs across the country. Sullivan's third call was different in tone from the previous two. Gone was the confident broadcaster who was used to getting his way. In his place was a man who seemed to genuinely understand that he had made a serious error in judgment. "Miles," Sullivan began, "I've been thinking a lot about our previous conversations, and I want to apologize. You're right about what happened during your first appearance. I underestimated you, and I treated you in a way that was disrespectful. I'm sorry." Miles listened without comment. "I'm calling because I want to make this right. Not just with a contract offer, but with a genuine partnership. I want to give you a platform to present jazz the way you think it should be presented, without interference from me or anyone else at CBS." "That's an interesting offer, Ed," Miles said. "But here's the problem. You're apologizing to me now because you need me. Your show's jazz ratings have been disappointing since my appearance, haven't they? The young audience that tuned in to see me isn't sticking around for your regular programming." For the first time in their three conversations, Miles sensed that Sullivan might actually be sincere. Sullivan's silence confirmed Miles's suspicion. Real respect would have been treating me properly from the beginning. Real respect would have been understanding that I'm an artist with something valuable to contribute, not just a performer you could manipulate for your audience's entertainment. Miles continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when he was teaching younger musicians important lessons about the music business. "So this apology, as sincere as it might be, is still about what I can do for your show. It's still about using me to solve your programming problems. That's not respect, Ed. That's just smarter exploitation." "Ed, let me tell you what I learned from our first encounter," Miles said. "I learned that when you give people the power to humiliate you, they'll use it. And once they've used it, they'll always see you as someone who can be humiliated." Miles considered this question carefully. In truth, he had been thinking about it for months. The financial opportunities were enormous, and the platform could indeed help jazz reach new audiences. But there were principles at stake that went beyond personal benefit. "So there's nothing I can say or offer that would change your mind?" Sullivan asked. "But you turned that situation into a triumph," Sullivan pointed out. Miles paused, thinking about how to explain something that had become clear to him over the past year. "I did, but that doesn't change what you tried to do, and it doesn't mean I should put myself in a position where you could try to do it again. When I walked onto your stage that night and you forced me to play piano, you thought you were teaching me a lesson about power. You thought you were showing me that you control what happens on your show, and I was just there to do whatever you told me to do. But here's what you didn't understand then, and what I'm not sure you understand now," Miles continued. "I don't need your show, Ed. I don't need television. I don't need mainstream acceptance, and I don't need the kind of success that comes from compromising who I am as an artist." "I realize now that was wrong," Sullivan said. "My music reaches the people who need to hear it," Miles explained. "The people who come to my concerts, who buy my albums, who understand what I'm trying to do artistically. Those people found me without your help, and they'll continue to find me without it." "But think about all the young people who could discover jazz through television," Sullivan argued. "Think about the cultural impact you could have." This was the heart of Miles's decision, and it was something that most people in the entertainment industry couldn't understand. In an era when television exposure was seen as the ultimate goal for any performer, Miles Davis was walking away from it by choice. And more importantly, Miles added, I don't need to work with people who see me as a tool for their success rather than as an artist worth respecting." Miles laughed, but it wasn't a bitter sound. It was the laugh of someone who had figured out something important. "Ed, you still don't get it. You're talking about impact, as if it's something I need you to achieve. But I'm already having impact. The musicians who matter know my work. The music is growing and evolving and reaching new people every day. I don't need to be on your show to validate what I'm doing." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Sullivan making increasingly desperate offers. He proposed giving Miles his own monthly special. He offered to let Miles produce jazz segments featuring other artists. He even suggested that Miles could have input into how jazz was presented across all CBS programming. But Miles had made up his mind months earlier, and nothing Sullivan could offer was going to change it. "Ed," Miles said finally, "I want to leave you with something to think about. You called me 3 times because you need what I can provide, but you never once called to ask what you could provide for me, or for jazz music in general. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of partnership you're really offering." Some industry insiders thought Miles had made a career-killing mistake. Television was the future of entertainment, they argued, and no musician could afford to alienate the medium's most powerful figure. Others saw Miles's decision as a bold statement about artistic integrity that went far beyond his personal career. He had proven that successful artists didn't have to accept disrespectful treatment, even from the most powerful platforms in the industry. After Miles hung up the phone that February day in 1959, word quickly spread through the entertainment industry that he had definitively turned down the Ed Sullivan Show. The reaction was swift and polarized.